All right. Good evening. Lovely to have you all here. Thank you for coming and thank you for showing up for yourself and for your children. In this group coaching session, we will be looking at internet, social media, and device safety for children and teenagers. We're going to try to do a lot in this short period of time. So some of the information would overlap. They would apply to the internet as a whole. Some of them would apply to social media specifically and to devices. Okay. So why are we here? And who am I? Why am I able to tell you this? Why should you listen to what I have to say? Essentially, I'm a family engineer with a particular focus and passion for parenting. And I use coaching, counseling, and therapy to support individuals, families, teenagers, children. I do all of this to help them attain a state of core balance and bliss and to maximize their potential. My training is in family systems engineering. I also practice neurolinguistic programming, and I have done this since 2019. And so I have experience and I have training, and I've put in quite a number of hours in the field, working practically and with these categories of individuals. And the results have been remarkable. Because this is science, it is something that is tested, our methods are proven, and they do work. And I encourage you to take advantage of help that is available to you. I tell parents all the time, help is available to you. You don't have to struggle on your own. There are a lot of my colleagues scattered all around the globe. And if you need my help personally, I'm happy to have a conversation and we'll see what can be done. And if it is that you need someone who is closer to you in proximity, in a physical location that is close to you, I would be happy to refer you to any of my colleagues so that they can support you. All right, let's jump into our conversation for today. The access points that we're considering when we talk about the internet devices and we talk about social media platforms, we're looking at game consoles. We're looking at social media platforms like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. There's a whole lot more. There are countries that have their own unique, specific social media platforms that they use and their children have access to. Where we would also be considering tablets as an extension of devices and laptops, and then to regular good old-fashioned television, as well as streaming platforms like YouTube, Netflix, and all of that. All right, so our conversation is about all of these devices and all of these access points that can affect and make contact with your children. Okay, so I'm going to kind of give us some statistics, okay? Because like I said, this is science. This is not me making suggestions or recommendations off the top of my head, right? This is me trying to help you see what we have found out, right? And like I said, this is research-based. This is information that is statistically backed. And in addition, this is information that is provided from myself and my colleagues, what we have seen in interacting with children as a result of their access or connection or interference of the internet, social media, and the likes, all right? So this is research-based, like I said. This is information that we have come across in our documented information that we have come across in our work, okay? So we're going to be looking at a few statistics, okay? This one helps us understand that devices, social media, the internet in itself is not bad, okay? We must understand that it's not bad. It's the use that's the problem, and specifically the exposure, okay? Now, these devices are so efficiently designed that they do exactly what they are supposed to do, which results in a state of dependency when there is excessive use, okay? There's a quote credited to Mr. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, or Meta Universe, as he likes to call it, that he would not put his child in front of a device. He will not give his child access to devices, okay? And this is somebody who has leveraged that area, the internet, social media, social engineering platforms, starting with Facebook, as we all know. And he's saying that he will not give his child access to such, okay? And that tells us quite a bit, okay? So this quote says a lot depends on how kids are using media and devices, how much their parents are monitoring their use, how much time they're spending, and what exactly they are watching and using. All right. And this is from Mr. Victor Strasberger, who is a pediatrician, a professor emeritus, and at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. Another statistic for us to evaluate this evening. After analyzing data from 35,000 American children aged 6 months to 17 years and their caregivers, researchers found that the sweet spot seems to be about 1 to 2 hours of screen time a day. Screen time includes using digital devices such as iPads and television. We're still looking at some statistics, okay? Now, going to the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, they have stepped in with their own recommendations, looking at trends, okay? And the AAP has called for no screen time at all for children until 18 to 24 months, except for video chatting, okay? And they have said that children aged 2 to 5 should get an hour or less of screen time per day. We're going to see why all of this is occurring, why organizations like the World WHO and the AAP have come out to say, look, this is what we recommend when it comes to screen time. All right, now this is a long one. Researchers have found links between screen time and various health outcomes in teenagers. The firmest associations are between screen time, obesity, screen time and obesity, screen time and depressive symptoms, right? And this is according to a systematic review of reviews published by the University College London psychologist Nisa Steele, okay? And Russell Viner, who is a professor of adolescent health at the same University College London, okay? Most research on obesity focused on television viewing and found that more time spent watching TV was associated with a higher BMI, body mass index, or body fat composition. Now, multiple studies also found out screen time of more than 2 hours a day was correlated with depressive symptoms, okay? The reviewers found evidence linking screen time to a poorer quality of life, higher caloric intake, and less healthy diets, okay? Evidence linking screen time to other problems such as behavior issues, anxiety, and low feelings of well-being and self-esteem were seen as well. We're still looking at the statistics. Furthermore, screen use releases dopamine in the brain. Now, this is trying to explain why it is addictive, right? And like I said earlier, it is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. That is the design of the device or the TV or the screen itself, in whatever form that the child accesses it. It releases dopamine in the brain, which can actively affect impulse control. Studies have shown screen time affects the frontal cortex of the brain, and the effect of screen time is similar to the effect of cocaine. Similar to drugs, screen time sets off a pleasure reward cycle that can have a negative impact on the life of a child, in the life of anybody. But a child is particularly endangered by this activity, obviously excessively, because their brains are still developing. So if a child's brain that is supposed to be rapidly multiplying and developing is affected or exposed to screen time, then that development is affected, okay? And the implication is that the full manifestation, as it were, of that child's brain is hindered, all right? Some more stats before we begin our conversation this evening. The relationship between social media and mental health is complicated. Now, on one hand, it can help users grow community and explore creative expression. Remember, we said in itself, it is not bad, okay? It is the use that is the problem. And by use, I mean from both ends, from the consumption end and from the uploading end. Because whatever it is a child or a person consumes on social media was put there by somebody. And again, it is not a horrible thing. It's not dangerous in itself. The use is the problem. All right. Studies also suggest that heavy social media use may cause harm, contributing to anxiety, body dysmorphia, disordered eating, self-harm, and depression. Right? This is something that we have seen on the field, like I said, in teenagers especially. The concept of social media hinders their perception of reality. And because, again, they are children, they are still figuring things out, they are still working things out, their minds are not fully developed. Biologically, their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until around age 25. So when there is exposure to that unreal world of social media, where anything can be misrepresented, anything can be presented in any form, there is a possibility that there is a negative effect on that child. There is a high chance of, harm coming to that child because of this exposure. And we have seen anxiety, we have seen depression, we have seen suicidal ideation from children who have been exposed to social media, because again, that distortion of reality occurs, all right? Another information or statistic about social media. Social media provides an endless amount of immediate rewards, trying to address the concept of addiction here again, in the form of attention from others for relatively minimal effort. The brain rewires itself through this positive reinforcement, making people desire likes, retweets, and emoticon reactions. What this then results in is cloud chasing. In the past week, a young man altered a tweet and he posted it about a very famous celebrity. And why did he do this? He wanted the attention. And what resulted was that the celebrity had him picked up, he was beaten up, roughened up, and he had to bear the consequences of his choice. Now, one would expect that this young man would know that what he did was wrong, and this was not even a child. But because of that immediate gratification, that attention-seeking tendency that I must say we all have, okay? We all have it in normal quantities. It becomes excessive when there is now that external force, that hidden capacity of social media to help one crave that attention to an excessive degree. That is where the problem occurs. And, it's called cloud chasing in today's terms. People post all sorts of things. Young people who should know better, children who should know better, put all sorts of things on social media because of that immediate gratification, because that's of that unrealistic expectation that people would like them. Now, what happens on the flip side of this is that when they don't get that attention, it then results in depression. So if they get the attention, they do more unusual things. I'm using unusual like it's a positive thing. They do more unusual things, unexpected things, unreasonable things to get that attention. Now, when they don't get it, it then leads to depression because something in them tells them they are not good enough. Their self-esteem is affected. There is a reduction in their sense of self-worth. And there is a chance that they will then try to do more outrageous things. Because like we talked about, we haven't talked about it, but there is the dopamine rush that occurs when you get that gratification, okay? That rush, that feel-good hormone that rush that comes through a person's body when somebody likes your picture or they make a comment that's positive about something you're wearing or how you're looking, okay? If this is not carefully managed, especially in the case of children, that desire then needs to be taught. So it's like cocaine, like we referenced earlier. And after a while, a certain amount will not be enough. And then you need a higher dosage. And then you need a higher dosage. And that's how the addiction comes about. That's how that dependency comes about. All right. Okay, so what are the risk factors that we have to be aware of? Again, this is information that we have seen. This is information that we have come across, that we are aware of, that actually occurs. Now, these are not suggestions. These are actual true events. Now, first on our list is dependency and addiction. And we've tried to explain that dopamine release. And like I said, once you get a little bit of a quantity, it meets that need, but you need a little bit more. You need a high, a little bit more, and then you go back, and then you go back. Now, I've also seen cases of children where the device they have in front of them cannot be successfully taken away from them. They escalate, and the parents are at a loss. They don't know what to do. When that occurs, there is a tendency or possibility that that dependency stage is starting to build up. Now, if the parent is not firm enough, or they are not able to convince their children that, look, you have to let go of this device now. You cannot continue to hold on to it, or it's time to do something else. If the parent allow that window to slide, and the child continues to, when they react and they, throw a tantrum, the parent compensates by saying, okay, you can have it. They throw a tantrum, the parent says, okay, it's okay. I don't want any problems. I don't want your trouble. Or maybe we're in public. I don't want that shame. You can have it. That addiction then builds on top of each other. And it leads to other problems. It leads to other behavioral problems, okay? And like we said earlier, the brain of a child is fragile. In that developmental stage, it is what you allow that is going to continue. So if you're able to prevent that exposure, better for you. If your child has been exposed and you are at that dependency stage, it will be your responsibility as a parent to do what is in your child's best interest, to begin to cut back and ensure that that dependency is reduced until that child is weaned of that drug. Because we have now agreed that because of access to screens and social media and the internet, and by design, that device itself, there is a potential for dependency, because that is what they are designed to do, to keep the person coming back. The flashing lights continuously alter the brain chemistry such that that addiction is actively worked towards, okay? Another thing that we've seen in children who have been exposed to screens, either early or excessively, or have unregulated access to screens, we've seen developmental delays. And this is in much younger children. So a child who is supposed to begin to, talk at a particular age, they are not talking. A child who is supposed to begin to identify colors, to see things, to be able to, recognize social cues, they are not doing that. And it has been screen addiction or screen use, early and excessive, has been linked to some of these tendencies that we've seen. Now, obviously, that is not the only reason why a child may have developmental delays, but it is a risk factor. It is something that we have seen, and there have been instances where when the screen was taken away, after a period of time, the child's development kicked in again and it restarted, and this child was able to find their way back. Now, I had worked with a child who wouldn't say anything, but we knew this child could talk because when you take that screen away, the child is able to talk. But the child would rather not say anything to the parents. He will not ask. As long as he had his tablet in front of him, he will not say anything. How we resolve this was to put physical distance between that child and the screen. And I asked the parent, you're going to need to remove that thing from the house for your child's safety and in their best interest. Because we're talking about a 3-year-old child who was already developing, tendencies and violent responses to an attempt to separate them from the screen. What happened was that after a while, the child, cried and went on, and eventually they gave up because the parents were ready to do what was necessary. And the child then began to use his words to describe and ask for the things that he wanted. And at that point, we could see the direct link. This child was able to form words and put them together, but because he was not doing it, he had that delay, right? And when the screen was separated from the child, the development kicked in and we were able to see the changes that we required. Another thing that we've seen is impaired brain development, okay? Because of the alteration in the brain structure due to excessive screen use, learning ability is diminished. Cognitive ability is diminished. Some children find it difficult to pick up on language. Some children find it more difficult to learn any new thing. Now, from ages 0 to 3, or even older, the mind of a child is a sponge. You don't need to sit a child down to teach them certain things. But we find that screen use gets in the way of that natural ability of a child to absorb information from the environment. It gets in the way of that. And it obviously is not good for a child, because a child's brain is that the neurons in their brain, they're multiplying, rapidly. But excessive screen use, or screen use at all, at the early stages between 0 and 2, has been shown to stand in the way of that and make it difficult for the brain to develop as it ordinarily should be able to do. Let's talk about health problems, because this is quite an issue where it comes to children. Health problems like obesity have been observed in children that are exposed to screen and excessively exposed at that. There's been obesity, there's been poor eating habits. We have seen long-term problems like type 2 diabetes. And this also is linked to obesity, where a child is not able to move around, is largely sedentary. When a child is on a device and they're staring at it, they're sat in one position where they're supposed to exercise their bodies and, play around, jump around a little bit, obviously within reason. But that's what a child is supposed to do. They're supposed to explore the environment. They're just sat in one place. It has also been noticed that some children develop myopia. They develop eye problems, and also because of the position that they are sat in, if they have a handheld device, for instance, then they are hunched over and they begin to have problems with their back. They have poor posture. They have neck problems, okay? All of this is just because of one little device somewhere that has not been properly put to use, all right? So it is important for parents to be aware of this, to take note of this, so that long-term health problems can be avoided, all right? Next, let's talk about mental health issues. Like I said earlier, in teenagers, we've seen anxiety, we've seen depression, we've seen suicidal ideation from children who are hooked on screens, and in some cases, social media, in some cases, streaming devices and platforms. Now, the brain of a child, again, is underdeveloped. Like I said earlier, the prefrontal cortex, which is the decision-making center of the brain, is still undergoing development, okay? Now, the brain works with the raw materials that you give it to work, okay? And a child is forming their perspective, their understanding of the world by just being exposed to it. Now, when a child is exposed to screens and they're exposed to information, their perception of the world is distorted. Their understanding of right and wrong is distorted. And what they constantly feed their eyes and their ears on begins to enter their minds, and it begins to adjust and twist their perception and understanding of the world. Now, if a child, or we've talked about attention, if a child does not get the attention that they want or desire from social media, or maybe they put up a post or whatever, and nobody is liking it, nobody is paying attention to it, then they begin to see themselves as the problem, rather than understand that reality is different from what they see on a computer, and that the person that they are chatting with or having a conversation with behind the computer is not necessarily a real person, that they should prioritize how the person perceives them over the people that are around them. They're not able to tell that difference because, again, their brains are still developing. Their mindsets are still in work in progress. They're still coming to understand what is real, what is not, okay? And we have seen this quite a bit. It takes a while to work through some of these things. So we advocate prevention, we advocate adequate management. And if it has occurred, then it will take a bit of work to resolve it, but it is possible to address it. Okay. There's exposure to pornographic content. Anybody who's been online will know that you don't necessarily have to seek in explicit material before it jumps at you. Again, the people who create websites, who create some of these games that children play, intentionally make material like that and content like that available to children. I call them enemies of children. Okay, and they are consciously, actively working on the minds of children to achieve a state of perversion. Okay, and it is the duty of the parents to make that as difficult or as difficult for it to happen as possible by prevention, by paying close attention when a child is on devices. We're still going to look at what parents can do, but these are some of the risk factors, things that can occur when a child is online, when a child has the device connected to the internet in front of them. Even some games and some apps have some hidden bugs that expose children to unwanted information. All right. Next, there's filter disruption and desensitization. We have touched on that filter disruption because a child is being raised in a home, they are being taught certain things, they are being raised with certain values. When they come online, if there is contrary information, it can lead to their filter. Their filter in this sense is their consciousness, their awareness, what they consider okay and not okay. It can be tainted and it can be disrupted. And there is desensitization to what you see regularly, even as an adult. And perhaps there were some things that you considered a little bit odd, and then you find that you're exposed to it over and over again. And for some reason, you're not as annoyed about it as you were before. Before, you were conscious and you would quickly walk away. But now they're like, well, so it's just one of those things. There's nothing I can do about it. It's that desensitization. It's that constant exposure. It just becomes normalized, as it were. And that can occur when a child is exposed to the screen, to the internet, to games, and to social media in any form. And we've also seen violent and aggressive behavior. Sometimes it occurs when you try to separate the child from the device. Sometimes it's as a result of games, it's as a result of platforms that these children play on, okay? So they see some of these things and they want to try it out. They want to experiment. Again, because they are children, their sense of right and wrong is still in process and is still in development. And sometimes they just try certain things out and sometimes they go left, okay? A child does not intend to hurt anybody, but they've seen something on a cartoon and they try it out and then it harms another person. And sometimes it's sexual behavior, sexually deviant behavior. In fact, sexual behavior in any form in a child is deviant, okay? Let's just be clear on that. So sometimes it's something they've seen and they just want to experiment. They just want to try it out. And in other times, it is that aggressive behavior. Maybe a game, a computer game, shows people hurting other people. And because a child is a child, they want to copy that behavior and replicate it. We've also seen low self-esteem and bullying. Cyberbullying is a whole thing and also results in those mental health issues that we touched on earlier. The child's sense of identity is compromised when they're exposed to screens and exposed to information that is contrary to who they should be believed that they are, okay? So they begin to feel less of themselves. They begin to experience low self-esteem and they begin to question their own identity. And that directly ties in with body dysmorphia and gender identity confusion. Again, it's this information put together by people who do not care about children, who are not interested about their well-being. But sometimes it's as a result of money-making ventures, people who, Big Pharma has been implicated in some of these things. They say that some people believe that they put out information and push out information that affects young people so that they can then be dependent on medication that helps them address some of these things, okay? And so I met a child a while ago, and this child was reeling off things that were wrong with them. And she said she had ADHD and she couldn't sit in one place. And I thought to myself, okay, did the doctor tell you all of this? She said no. She read it somewhere. oh, okay, where did you read it? What is the source of this information? How did you come about this diagnosis? And then she said, actually, she saw a video and they described all her symptoms and she believes what that person was saying. So again, a child does not know any better. They do not know what they should believe and what they should not believe. And exposure to the internet, exposure to screens, exposure to social media put some of these thoughts in these children's heads and they believe it wholeheartedly and begin to act in alignment with that perception that has been created for them. Some people believe that their bodies are not what they should be because there's this idea that is propagated on the internet of what an ideal person should look like. And so because they don't match that look or that particular shape, they feel that there's something wrong, not realizing that content that is put on social media is doctored to look a certain way. But a child is not necessarily aware of that. And then they begin to question things that they should not be questioning about themselves. It also results in impaired social skills. Social media use, device use is solitary, isn't it? If a child is playing a game, then they are focused and fixated on that device, or they are watching a video, they are focused on that rather than the environment around them. So rather than being able to pick up on social cues or facial expressions, all they know, all they are aware of, if it is excessive, again, is that device that they're playing with. And that is a risk factor, especially for babies. At that stage, they are supposed to be picking up on things around them, getting comfortable with the environment, learning stuff, touching things, picking up on different textures, developing their brains and loading it with information, giving it something to work with. Okay, that is impaired and that causes problems later in life. Okay, we've talked about reality distortion, about the fact that they don't know what is okay, what is not, that desensitization. They see it over and over and over again. And there is just not that there is that knowledge of right and wrong is just taken away from them because their reality, their sense of reality is distorted. There's augmented reality now that literally rewires the brain. Once, if a person is constantly exposed to it, what it feeds them with is information that can be detrimental to their well-being. And when these virtual reality devices came out, they were so few and far between, but now you can come across one. Mark and Apple and Meta are in this battle about the augmented reality devices that they are creating now. And these devices actually situate the person who is consuming it in those reality worlds. Okay, it's not even that you're watching a video anymore. You're standing, it makes you feel like you're standing right in the midst of that. And there is a risk, there is a danger, because the brain does not know the difference between what you are seeing and what you're experiencing. Okay, the brain cannot tell that difference. It's fantastic, but it's not that fantastic. So when it becomes something that a child has engaged in over and over again, and they don't have anyone around them to have a conversation with about that experience, and the person can bring them back to solid ground, then they run into trouble because their reality is distorted. And finally, poor academic performance and declining cognitive ability. One of the scariest consequences of excessive use of screens and access to screens is the effect that it has on the brain. Okay, the structure of the brain itself is distorted. The gray matter that is useful for thinking and processing actively begins to shrink, right? And neurologists have studied this and observed this phenomenon, such that, and it is because when you're watching something, you're passive. The brain is not activated, right? The brain is not involved because you're just watching and consuming. And this speaks to it being excessive. Now, if a person watches some information and then they apply it and put it to use, then the brain is engaged. But when there is excessive use and it's all consumption and consumption and consumption, then because the brain is not activated and not put it to use, those cells begin to shrink. I remember I was taught the law of use and disuse in biology, and this is particularly dangerous for children with growing brains. Now, if an adult decides that they're ready for their brain matter, the gray matter in their brain to shrink and reduce, that's up to them, but not for a child, okay? Not for a child. And how this manifests is in poorer concentration, it manifests in weaker memory, slower information processing, and weaker impulse control. Now, these things are, impulse control is already a challenge for any child, okay? Because like we said, their brain is still developing. But when a child whose brain cells should be multiplying, should be applying it and beginning more material to work with, is then experiencing declining cognitive ability, then it puts the rest of us in jeopardy, because children are the future, aren't they? If the children that are being born are not able to innovate and solve problems at the level that they are supposed to be at, it means that the expectation that a generation will be an improvement on the previous will be in jeopardy. It would certainly be at risk. In fact, the kind of decisions and the choices that they will be making will compromise the advancements that humanity has attained up until now. So this is something that is critical that we have to look at. So what can we do? How can we keep our children safe? How can we make it less risky for them to utilize devices? Okay, number one is to get informed. Get informed. We need information. We need to know what these dangers are. We need to know what is causing problems, okay? And when I say get informed, you need to learn about your child. If you're going to have a conversation with your child, it's better to approach it from a position of knowledge and awareness, okay? So that you can be strategic about it. If you try to approach a child in the least effective way, you would have put in the same amount of effort, but the result that you get will not be commensurate. And anybody will get tired. I'm trying to reach a person over and over again and not achieving much results. So you need to be aware of what the dangers are, of what your child is doing. You need to be aware of these risk factors, as we have updated ourselves this evening. And obviously, it has to be an ongoing thing, because the world around us is evolving, and quite rapidly so. And then number two, you need to know your own child. You need to be aware of who they are. You need to be aware of how they learn. Now, some children will benefit from screens, and we have said over and over again that screens and devices and the internet and social media in itself is not bad. It is how it is used. It is how it is deployed. It is how it is managed. Some career paths are now have now developed such that some people make a decent living from content creation. So you would see a fully fledged grown adult say, I'm a content creator. 10 years ago, that didn't exist. And some people are actually doing positive work by it, okay? So it's not necessarily bad. They are contributing meaningfully to society. They are making information available to us. They are sharing valuable content, and they're making a living. So it's not necessarily bad, okay? But if it is not carefully curated, then it can be a danger to other people, because content creation depends on eyes, isn't it? Depends on how many views, how many people are watching that content. And if a person is not mature enough, then they begin to get that gratification, and they don't realize when they are supposed to dial it back and not go overboard to get that attention that they are seeking by putting their content out there. Okay, so social media in itself is not bad. It is how we use it. So learn about it, learn about all of these platforms, learn about the access points, learn about how it affects your child and what you can do, learn about your child, get to know them, and then learn about yourself. A while ago, I was having a conversation with a parent, and were able to narrow down the issues that their child was exhibiting behavior. We're trying to modify behavior, right? And there were some things that the child was doing, and we're able to narrow it down to was it a game or watching something on the internet or whatever. And the recommendation was, can you ensure that this child has minimal use? We don't try to remove these things cold turkey, because some children react badly, especially when that dependency has been created. But In some cases, you may find that a child will do well with cold turkey, with the cold turkey approach. A cold turkey, by cold turkey, I mean separating the child. That abrupt removal. Okay, so that was the recommendation. Changes were not occurring, and when we had review sessions, I would say, so how are you doing with the devices? I hope the tablet is now being monitored. I hope that they're only getting an hour access a day. And the parents said, look, I can't do that to my child. And I said, oh, okay, explain to me. Why can you not do that? And they said, well, I was very poor. Excuse me, I was very poor growing up, and I didn't have all of these things. And I promised myself I was going to give my child a good life. And what I heard was a parent trying to live their own poverty through their child. I'm not sure I said that correctly, but they were trying to address their poverty. Exactly. They were trying to address the poverty they experienced as a child, and ensuring their children did not experience the same, not realizing or identifying that it was causing harm to that child. Okay. So for me, that lack of self-awareness from the parents was shining through. That inability to recognize that they were victims of their own trauma, unresolved trauma, and it was affecting the choices they were making for their child. So sometimes you find that parents think they're doing what is best for the child, and God bless parents. It is hard, tasking, selfless work that we do. But if you don't recognize your own trauma and you don't deal with it, you will make decisions based off of that to the detriment of your child with good intentions. Good intentions notwithstanding, you will harm and hurt your child because of the choices that you make. Sometimes the lack of information, and we've said get informed, sometimes it is because of that unresolved trauma. So get information about the situation. In this case, we're talking about device use. Get information about your child, know them, know how best to reach them, how best to communicate with them, and then learn about yourself so that you can identify where you are causing harm for your child and then begin to mitigate it. Number two, consider delaying exposure. Now, we've talked about how ages 0 to 2 is not recommended. Okay, we looked at those stats in the beginning, and if you watch the replay, you'll be able to see them again. If you are able to delay that exposure, then you are essentially giving more time to other things that your child can do that can aid their brain development. So if a child spends 2 hours in front of a screen, and the child is under 2, that is 2 hours that the child could have spent learning about the environment, learning about colors, picking up on different textures. So if you look at it from that perspective, then it is beneficial if you delay that exposure, because a child will always be able to learn about how to use a device. Okay, it's not even a skill that children that are born in this age have to make an effort to learn. So I've also heard parents say things like, oh, how would they know how to press a phone or how to use a gamepad? It doesn't take that long. They're pretty smart, these children. It doesn't take that long. But the window that you have to help that child develop those critical social skills, that spatial awareness skill in that window of ages 0 to 2, that window will shut by that 0 to 2. Okay, and whatever it is they're able to gather, they will work with it. But we're talking about putting them in the best state of being, ensuring that they have all they need for their brains to develop correctly and appropriately, and having that correct sense or perception of the world around them. Okay, so that window is critical. If you can avoid putting them in front of a screen or giving them a device, highly recommended. Ages 2 to 5, the recommendation is 1 hour. Okay, so consider delaying exposure and then regulate screen use. I tell parents it is what you allow that continues. If that dependency results, it is because you allowed it. If you do not allow it, the child will be fine. Okay, the child will be fine. It does not take a lot of effort to get comfortable in front of the screen. Again, it is designed to be addictive. It is designed to give that pleasurable release, okay? So anybody will be comfortable in front of it. I'm talking about neurotypical children. Let's bear that in mind. Anybody will be comfortable in front of it. So that cannot be a problem. But the risk of dependency is a real one. and it is wise for you to do what is necessary to mitigate it. Number three, if your child has to use a device, say for schoolwork, or you encourage it, because obviously information on the internet is valuable, okay? The internet is a valuable source of information. Somebody has described YouTube as a university because there's literally nothing you want to learn that you cannot find somebody somewhere who has tried it before and uploaded it on YouTube. So for me, YouTube is a valuable resource. So giving your child access to the internet at an appropriate age by their development is not a problem, but you should be able to monitor it. Now, some parents are afraid, that some parents consider it a privacy issue. I think that should not be something one should consider, because if you put a device in the hand of a child, it is not theirs, it is still yours. It needs to be subject to your control. If it is not subject to your control, there is a problem, okay? If it is not subject to your control, there is a problem. If you cannot say, please put that down, or we have agreed on a particular window for the day or for the week, and you have met that quota, please put that away and do something else, there is an issue that needs to be addressed very, very quickly. And if you cannot put a monitoring tool or something like Google Family Link and set it up on your child's phone, to their knowledge, there is an issue. It's something you need to have a conversation with them about and say, look, this device is in your care. It does not belong to you. It is not yours for keeps. I am the one who has loaned it to you, and I reserve the right to exercise the parental control that I have over you and that device, okay? That is a conversation that you need to have with that child. When you're monitoring and providing tools and all of that, you also need to provide alternatives, because we've said 2 hours, for instance, 2 hours device time a day. What do they do with the rest of the time? I recommend having regular boredom breaks. Boredom is good for children. Boredom is good for everybody, but it's particularly good for children because it drives creativity. So if it is a case of, oh, I am busy or I need you engaged, then you need to make a plan. You need to preempt that window where they would not have access to those devices and give them alternatives to work. It's good for them to work with their hands if they like to build something. Obviously, we have said know your child. So you want to do something or give them alternatives that match their interest. And if it is a case of learning something new, then expose them to something new. It is always good for them. Number 4, you need to have daily and regular check-ins with your child. Because they are exposed to the world around them, you being careful and managing what they are watching and making sure you're monitoring, you're tracking where they are going and all of that, does not mean other parents are doing the same thing. And your child is going to make contact with those people. Now, what you want to achieve as a parent is contact without contamination, where your child can make contact with people and things that are inappropriate according to your values and your idea of what is okay and what is not. But for that thing not to contaminate them, not to shift their perspectives or shift their minds in the direction that is undesirable, okay? But that exposure, you need to be aware of it so that you can mitigate where necessary, so that you can reinforce where necessary, so that you can say, well done for making that decision to walk away where necessary. All of that, when you're able to do all of that on a regular basis, then you're able to install identity components into your child, such that even when they are separated from you, they know who they are. And by extension, they know what is appropriate for them to do and what it is not appropriate for them to do. All right. So those daily conversations are important with your child. That regular interaction is important with your child. They come back from school asking open-ended questions. Oh, what happened today? What nice thing did you do for somebody today? Or what didn't you particularly like today? Anything interesting happened at school today? Come and tell me about it. I have an alarm on my phone. It's a 15-minute daily check-in alarm with each child individually, just to touch base and see if there's anything hovering around their minds. Sometimes we just sit in silence. We've done that before. We just sit in silence and they're like, there's nothing. I'm like, well, there has to be something. Okay, just tell me, what did you learn today? What new thing hadn't you ever heard before and you picked on today? And we have had instances where it is at these regular interactions, they're like, oh, such and such even happened. This person even said this. We still had one interesting conversation, my son and I, this evening. And he was like, oh, is it okay to use certain kinds of colorful language? Let's go with colorful when you're referring to something somebody said. And it was a moment to reinforce. They say, look, if it comes out of your mouth, what it means is that it's in your heart. So the question is it in your heart? Oh, no, I wouldn't think about such things. Then you shouldn't repeat it because it is inappropriate language. It does not match your identity. And then he smiled and said, thank you, mommy. So it's from those interactions. And that is important and vital for you. So that when they come in contact with information, inappropriate information, they're able to feed back to you and you can know what to take necessary actions on. Number 5, you need to watch your own behavior. Our children mirror our behavior. My mother always said children will listen to what you say, what you do, rather than what you say. She didn't say this when I was young. She said it when I became an adult, trying to talk to me about my behavior or the things that I do around my children, or in some cases about other people. So I said all of that to help to remind us that children mirror what we do. So if we're fixated on our own device, if we're constantly on a device, we're watching something, we're constantly on social media, they are going to pick up on it. And children smell hypocrisy. They can identify when you're asking them to do something that you would not do. All right. And in addition, I say practice intentional parenting. Intentional parenting is essentially parenting with an end in sight. So you have decided this is where we are going, and then you begin to work towards it. Now, if you're going to raise a person who will not be dependent on their device, you cannot show that the example to them today, okay? The law of, I've forgotten what it's called, but what it says is that the person who takes the longer time into consideration when making decisions today will have better results. So that is the entire concept of intentional parenting. You're looking at your child as that 25, 30-year-old. What kind of person are they? How do they process information? How do they think? You're feeding them to develop to that person, okay? You're watching over them on a daily basis. You're installing information in their minds to deliver that particular result, okay? So you have to be conscious of what you are doing today because they are watching, they are learning, they are absorbing, okay? So you cannot constantly be watching something and be telling them, oh no, you can't have your phone all the time. No. When we decided at home that the TV was going to be off, we're not going to watch, the children were not going to watch TV during the week so that they can focus on school stuff. It applied to us. So what we did was learn to watch TV after they had gone to bed. Now, the byproduct of that was that we encouraged them to go to bed early, which then results in the fact that they wake up early on their own and they get enough amount of sleep. So that's kind of like a multiplier effect situation. But we said TV cannot be watched during the week, so we don't watch either. That is the rule. The intentional parenting that we're talking about and those family rules and family values, they apply to everybody so that there is conditioning taking place. Whether we like it or not, we are conditioning our children. And if we leave our own conditioning, then the world around them will do it for them. So we need to stand up and show them a good example on a consistent basis. Next, cultivate a great relationship based on love, respect, and trust. You're going to need to be firm with your children every now and again, right? But the way you can avoid the friction that comes with firmness is to oil it with love and respect and trust. All right? Is to oil that relationship such that when you're saying, I'm afraid you cannot have that, I am sorry that cannot happen, I'm sorry you have had that phone for 2 hours and that is the cutoff point, there is that love in that atmosphere. The child is not feeling isolated. They're not feeling like this person just does not like my face. They're like, they recognize that it is born out of love. They are aware that they can trust you, and you have shown that example to them in other areas. So it is not only when we need firmness that you show up. It is when there is love and there's tenderness as well, when we are able to play with them, when we're able to have conversations without judgment, without shutting them down, being able to interact with them with respect, different kinds of respect. Obviously, the respect from a parent to a child is different from the kind from a child to the parent, okay? but respect nonetheless. You address them respectfully. You have conversations with them like they are human beings. Because if everything goes according to plan, you're going to be adults at the same time. That's that intentional parenting showing up there. You're recognizing that you're going to be adults with them at the same time. You're going to be mothers, you're going to be fathers at the same time. What kind of conversations do you want to have? And you want to be able to let them know that it is their best interest that you're at. You're not just being mean and unreasonable. All right. So cultivate that relationship. Let that be the foundation of your interaction so that when you have to put your foot down, it will be easier to do. All right. And finally, use your voice. Use your voice. When I say use your voice, I'm talking about the community around you. I'm talking about the children around you. So if you're in a community where there are children and you are sensing there's a dependency on internet use, you're sensing that there is an exposure or excessive exposure to social media or excessive exposure to device use, say something. It is how you say it that matters. If you call the parent and you say, oh, I think you should keep an eye on this. This is what I've learned recently, and there are risk factors and there's danger or whatever. Worst case scenario, they won't greet you anymore. That's the worst that can happen. But you would have said something. You would have helped the parents come to the realization of something they potentially had no idea about. Because a lot of people don't know the effects that these things have on children. So they think that is what is trending. Once a child turns one, you put them in front of a tablet. Oh, they learn by watching my children are grown now. I don't remember watching Barney and all of that, even from when they are babies. Research has shown that they don't learn as much as it has been portrayed that they do learn. Okay, it has been sold that there is a lot of transfer of information that is taking place. No, the brain is not activated. It is not participating. You take a child to Montessori, you're not likely to see them watching TV. You're likely to see them playing with stuff, touching things, building that, making a mess, which is fine. Okay, because that is actually how a child learns. Okay, so say something, share what you have learned, tell somebody about it. Use your voice if you're close to the school and they're making decisions that put the children at a disadvantage, or they are doing things that compromise the safety of the children. Say something. Don't be quiet in that environment. You're there for a reason. So use your voice in your community, use your voice around children, speak up on behalf of children, and hopefully the transformation that we require will happen by so doing. All right. So that's the end of our discussion this evening. We're right on the dot of an hour, which is really good. Well done to me. Well done to you. Thank you for showing up for your children. Let me just intimate us of our next upcoming event. This will be happening all through March, every Sunday in March. The course is called Becoming an Ocean. I will tell you, my son asked me about that today. I will tell you the story if you come to the event. And we offered a discount for people who registered by February 15th. And I'm extending that because I'm a nice person. I'm extending that to Friday. That's next week, Friday, I believe, 29th of February. There will be that 45% off discount will apply. So if you want to register, please send an email. Obviously, a good number of us are in the WhatsApp group, so you can send me a message. If you think it to be useful for somebody, please feel free to pass it on. And that is our conversation this evening. Thank you all. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them now. Any questions? Or have I overloaded us with information? Have I successfully done that? Is there any question on anybody's mind? Any challenge that you're having in this area? We can quickly look at it and I could give you some pointers. No questions? Everybody happy? Okay, all right. I will let us off. Thank you so much for attending and for everyone who will be seeing this later. It will be on my YouTube page and you can catch up with it. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for coming. Good night. Oh, you're welcome.